Hello, folks.
Hello.
And good afternoon, everyone. And we welcome everyone to a special meeting of the Township of Douro-Dummer for one reason and one reason only, and that is about the county official plan. So we welcome you. We remind you that it is being recorded on YouTube and presented live on the Township's YouTube channel. Just to call the roll, if you could raise your hand to confirm your attendance. Deputy Mayor Moher.
Here.
Councillor Watt.
Present.
Councillor Landsman.
I'm here.
And Councillor Watson.
I'm here.
Okay, and also with us is our CAO, Alana Arthurs. Alana, big wave to you, and our clerk, Martina Chade-Hartwig. Martina is here as well. I believe our chief building official, Brian Fawcett, is either on the screen or hiding in the background. So we will call the meeting to order at exactly 4:02 on this 15th of February. And we respectfully acknowledge that we're on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe, and we offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and their teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest with anyone?
Nope.
Seeing no hands, a motion please to adopt the agenda that's before you. Sheila and Heather, all in
Yes,
favor?
I would, if I may, is this a closed meeting?
Is it a closed meeting?
Yes.
No.
Oh, okay. The
It's
agenda
an open
doesn't,
meeting.
the agenda does indicate that it is. That's why I asked.
I don't see that on the pages I'm looking at, but perhaps, Martina, is there a conflict here?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is an open special meeting of council. There's no items listed in the closed session.
Closed. Okay. Thank you.
Right, it's not on mine, but I'll take a look and see what happened there.
It's on the
It's on the
agenda-
website. That's all.
It's on the
Oh,
agenda page.
Okay, it is not a closed meeting. This is open to the public.
Mhm.
Okay, we move into the only reason we're here, and that is an update on the County of Peterborough official plan. It's a huge document that I know you probably all spent a lot of time going through. Martina has done an amazing job of dealing with this issue, along with other representatives from the county and the townships. And she knows it like the back of her hand. It's a very intense subject. So without further ado, what we're going to do is let Martina describe the situation and what her recommendations are. And at the end of her presentation, we will allow questions and your comments about the whole document as a whole. So, Martina, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to acknowledge that this has been a team effort. Brian's really helped out, and of course, the staff at the county has been invaluable in leading the discussion and guiding us through this process. So I just want to acknowledge all the work that they've put into this as well. So there is quite a fulsome recommendation that's before you in this report. There's quite a few numbers, 8 recommendations. So I'll just read them. And then if you'd like me to highlight any or go through any specific parts of the report, I'm glad to do that. So it's recommended that the Township of Douro-Dummer support the County Official Plan Technical Advisory Committee's recommendation to use the Kawartha Naturally Connected Mapping as the framework for refinement for the Natural Heritage NHS overlay in the County Official Plan, that the retailing of agricultural products at farm stands and other on-farm diversified uses be limited to the products grown or manufactured in the local area. We're defining that as a region of 150 kilometers and excludes the reselling of items from food terminals. That camp housing for temporary workers, both foreign and domestic, be permitted as on-farm diversified uses in both the rural and agricultural areas. That the 5-year ownership rule remain as a criteria for residential consents in all land designations in the township except for rural settlement hamlet areas. that the township continued to use the calculation that lots must have existed for a minimum of 25 years prior to being eligible for a severance, that the rural settlement boundaries be modified to remove the designation from the area of Cottesloe, as it has no development potential, as it is constrained on all sides by the by the agricultural systems map, that rural settlement designation in Young's Point be adjusted to remove those lands that are sensitive, such as wetlands and other natural heritage features and conservation lands, that the rural settlement boundaries in the hamlet of Douro be shifted to the north and west to reflect the lack of potable water in the east and south. And finally, that allocations removed from Cottesloe and Young's Point be moved to the hamlets of Warsaw, Douro-Dummer, and Halls Glen, while keeping a net zero increase unless additional allocations are provided via the growth study that's currently being undertook by Hampson Accounting, that the lands located south of County Road 6 between County Road 29 and 28 be designated as employment lands, as there is additional allocation available. And if they are not able to be employment lands, that they be commercial lands. And finally, that the changes to the employment and commercial designations that are part of the chart contained in this report be implemented. And further, if additional allocations be provided to the township, that suitable lands for the designations be found along main transportation routes in the township to meet provincial growth and development goals. Those are the recommendations that I'm putting before you, and I'm happy to go through each one individually or answer any other questions that council may have about this project and how it's going.
Okay, thank you, Martina. We're now open for questions, and I do point out that the official plan, a good deal of it is something that we don't have a lot of control over. A lot of it is provincial mandated rules that we have to abide by, and we have to update our plans to reflect that. But indeed, as Martina said, there are some township-specific items in there, and I'm sure you got your questions lined up. So if you want to stick your hand in the air or raise your hand, Sheila, go ahead first.
Thank you. Through you to Martina. Great report, Martina. If you look at item 6, you and I have been in discussion with somebody who wants to sever a lot, but has not off the property, but has not owned it long enough to. Is this going to have any effect on them?
Number 6 is about the rural settlement areas. Perhaps you mean number 4, the 5-year ownership rule?
No, I was referring to number 6, the fact that moving to Warsaw, Douro-Dummer, and Halls Glen.
Oh, I know the specific person you're thinking of is outside of the range of either of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have not been to the property. So.
Oh yeah, no, they're well away, sadly. So that won't have an effect on them.
So nothing in this will have any effect on their request. Okay.
Not on their request.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, go ahead, Don.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Martina, thank you very much. Great report here. Looking over those maps is something that I'm sure none of us are real adept at when we don't do it every day. I've got a few things I wanted to ask about. Number one was, the first one was the number 4, the ownership, except for rural settlement hamlet designation. What does that entail? Is it a different time frame, or how does that work?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, for the rural hamlets, so those are areas such as the hamlet of Douro, Young's Point, Donwood, Warsaw, Halls Glen, Douro-Dummer. Those areas would not have a 5-year ownership rule, so you would be able to buy a lot, and if it meets all other severance criteria, you could sever it right away. You would not have to wait 5 years. We are suggesting this as the province has made it very clear they want to see growth happening in the settlement areas, and they want to see it happening quickly. We recently just saw a housing affordability report pushing for additional growth in settlement areas and also pushing for less onerous restrictions in those areas. So we thought one way we could try to work with the province and try to stay in line with their guidelines is by removing one of these criteria, which would be the 5-year ownership rule.
Perfect. Thank you. And my second question has to do with the number 6 that you were talking about. Is this something along the same line we did a few years ago where we took a designation off a certain spot and we actually incorporated the golf course, or what used to be Archie Kidd's golf course, into something that was more usable? Do we have say in this one, or is this like where these things are going to be designated that we take away from the other ones, or is this something that just the county has say over?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Great memory. This is exactly like that scenario. I remember that one as well. So we have the ability, the only time we have the ability to change our settlement boundary areas is during one of these comprehensive reviews. And so we have the ability to suggest where these additional or alternate lands can be placed, but we can't create new settlement areas. So we wouldn't be able to create a new settlement area, let's say at Webster and County Road 40, but we can add to our additional, our current settlement area. So we can change those boundaries slightly by moving allocation from one location to another, as long as the province accepts those and it doesn't interfere with either the natural heritage system or the provincial agricultural system. So really similar to the Archie Kidd situation.
All right, good. Thank you very much. Because I did have another question on that, but I'll sideline it for now until I get a bit more information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, who else has their list of questions?
Mr. Mayor, I see Carl, Deputy Mayor.
Carl, you did play the game and put the hand in the screen. That's good. It's hard to get used to that.
Great, thank you.
Very hard.
Yeah, I'm in full support of all items on there except for one, and that is number 2. The 100, I'm not sure I agree with the 150 kilometer. 150 kilometers are basically Toronto, which is the food terminal. And I'm sure we're not going to be going down the food terminal to look in over the walls to see who's buying, who's selling. I wonder what other townships are doing to manage that area when there is a farm stand set up. Are all the other townships in the 150 kilometer range? I would be more comfortable with 25 or maybe 50 at the very most.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure exactly what number other communities have chosen to go with. I do know that Cavan Monaghan had suggested 100 kilometers when before they made their decision to remove themselves from this province. That was the number that they had discussed.
Okay.
Here at the office, Brian and I were playing with a number of calculators to see the distance that 150 kilometers would take us from our region.
Mhm.
We did feel it was a reasonable number because it would incorporate those areas such as Prince Edward County, which has, a booming wine and spirit business. We don't really have that in our area, so we thought that's a local product that farm stands in our area could sell if they were able to meet all of the liquor license qualifications. But it also, the 150 doesn't take you all the way to the west side of Toronto. It keeps you on the eastern edge of the Toronto area. And we're specifically stating that they cannot resell items from the food terminal. So they would have to source them directly from a farmer.
The only issue with that, most people will be quite supportive of it, but when there is a violation or people are bringing it in from a commercial operation or whatever, it's a very hard thing to prove. And that's, whoever's enforcing it, you'll end up with neighbors complaining and they know what's going on, but it's hard to prove and it forces us into an awkward position. So it would be interesting to find out what other townships are doing at some point, because I'm sure it'll probably come up at public meetings too. But other than that, I'm happy with what's being said here, at least now, unless there's something I haven't seen in it. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you
welcome.
for that, Carl. Sheila, go ahead.
You're muted, Sheila.
You're muted, Sheila.
Sorry. Just to add to Carl's comment, I think roughly when you're looking from here to 150 kilometers, you're looking sort of south of Uxbridge and Mount Albert area, but I agree, it does not go down to Toronto. That's only from experience.
Okay, good point. So Martina, you were able to perhaps do a little more snooping on that detail.
So I've written that down.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions from a very lengthy document? Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I agree. It's a great report, great piece of work from our deputy clerk, or from our clerk rather, and from staff on this. I know it's been a long time coming. Most of the questions actually have already been asked. That to Deputy Mayor Moher's point about that radius, I was comfortable with it, with the wording saying like exclusive of any food terminals. We know about the one in Toronto, but there's also plans for other expansion in other terminals and other communities. So I think with that verbiage in there, I don't know how that looks on the enforcement side of things, but stretching down into, wine country and all that kind of stuff is important as well. The one thing that I did look into a little bit further was around, just checking my notes here, item number 3 on camp housing and temporary workers, whether they're domestic or migrant workers, as they're often called, coming into the region. Just making sure that the living quarters for them are meeting the necessary codes to be considered camp housing, and that they're not, setting up a field full of RVs or something like that. But after some conversation with Martina further about that, I got some satisfaction that wouldn't be the case. All in all, it's a great piece of work. And perhaps, Martina, you can just speak a little bit around that, the definition of what camp housing is from a structural safety bit.
So through you, Mayor, to Councillor Watson, when we were anticipating or envisioning what camp housing would mean, this would be housing such as the use of portable structures that have been rated for habitation, not temporary structures like a trailer, like an RV or something like that. Those are meant for camping and for recreational use. We are looking for structures such as portables or modular homes that can be placed on the site in meeting all of our bylaws and setback requirements, where we could provide safe habitation for these temporary workers while they work on farms doing on-farm product work, whether that's with crops or, who knows what. I'm thinking of like a McLean's Berry Farm situation, or perhaps a logging operation. They need to have safe and reasonable housing, and this is one way we can ensure that is provided, while also ensuring that this type of housing is not being used for, let's say, short-term rentals. That would be a totally different discussion and wouldn't fall into this camp housing requirement. So.
Okay, see no more hands. Alana, is there anything you'd like to say about the whole shooting match?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just thank you to Martina and the rest of the staff. It was a lot of work that went into it, and I know that she's been working very closely with the county and some of the requests that they've made. So I'm pleased that she was able to present this to you today and provide you with all the information that's come forth.
Okay, anybody else before we get a motion to proceed along? Sheila, go ahead.
Yes, to the chair. I have a question that does not relate necessarily to this, but to the official plan. Is that permitted?
We're talking about the official plan. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Through you then to Martina. Secondary suites, granny suites, garden suites, whatever you want to call them, they are not permitted in our township on private roads. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. That is our current bylaw, and that is what's in the current official plan is being carried forward in this new one.
And is there like a reason that they're not permitted? I've had a number of calls about them, and some of the reasoning doesn't seem to actually fit.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Landsman, when we did the all of the consultations back, I believe it was in 2018, regarding secondary suites, both at the official plan level and at the zoning level. One of the reasons why, well, there's multiple reasons why we excluded private roads. One of the biggest reasons was the ability to ensure there would be an emergency response on private roads. Some private roads are at different states of care than others, and we can't guarantee the same type of response for emergency services on a private road that we can on a public road. So we didn't want to increase density on those private roads and potentially make an emergency situation worse. There was also concerns on private roads. They're zoned as limited use locations, so typically limited service residential, and that's to reflect a lower density than shoreline residential. So we were trying to take that into effect. And then we were also thinking about the provision of additional services on private roads. There's no plowing unless, the local road association organizes it themselves. And we didn't think that having additional density in those areas where services aren't guaranteed would be a safe and reasonable decision to be making. Also, many private roads run through sensitive natural areas, or they're along provincially significant wetlands. We can think of a few like Duck Pond in that neighborhood up on Stony Lake, where we wouldn't want to see additional density going in because they're already quite sensitive locations.
Through the chair, thank you, Martina. Those are most of the reasons that I've heard, but it just seems that they're not very large, and yet we're permitting huge cottages to be built, and they too will need to be serviced for emergencies, and possibly the density will go up there, but big cottages are being permitted, and something that is just maybe to house granny is not permitted. They don't seem to balance out.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if council wanted to see smaller type residences built in those more sensitive areas or those locations on private roads, we will be reviewing the zoning bylaw coming up once the official plan process is complete. So that is something we could try to regulate through the zoning bylaw as opposed to the official plan.
So that could be regulated through the zoning bylaw then.
To reduce the size of cottages on private roads, absolutely.
Well, I was thinking more to permit granny suites, or like I say, whatever the current term is.
We would have to amend the official plan first, and then amend the zoning bylaw. So if council wanted to make a motion for me to bring that to county's attention, I can do that, but it's not been a discussion we've had previously.
I suppose the issue, Martina, is mostly the emergency vehicle access and lack of maintenance on private roads. I guess that's the biggest reason.
Yeah, the lack of service, that we can't guarantee the service for those locations.
Okay, anybody else? Oh, Carl, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Another issue on these private roads, it could add to the short-term rental situation that we're going to be dealing with in the months ahead.
Good point.
There's a lot of those are on private roads.
Okay, I think, as Martina said, that's a subject could be dealt with at a later time. I guess what we're looking for now is a motion to accept Martina's recommendations in principle and let the process continue in principle, meaning with some of the comments that she's heard tonight. Is that adequate, Martina?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, if council could approve the recommendation as it's presented or with any changes, that would be great. So I could pass that on to county staff so they can continue working on it. And that will allow them to continue editing the maps that we've requested. As you know, some of the maps weren't available today because they're still being worked on, but I wouldn't want them to do work that wasn't needed. So that will help clarify their next steps. It will also help us because we are planning some open houses soon. So having clear direction from council will allow us to communicate that effectively to the public so that the public understands what councils have done and how they've participated in this project.
Okay, that is the motion that we're after. Who would care to make that so we can move on? Carl?
I would move the recommendation and add the at the end in principle, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Martina, you're okay with that?
Just a clarification, if it's in principle, when would you like these recommendations to come back to be approved in practice?
We have not, I guess, Mr. Chair, through you, we have not gone to the public yet. And I think I'd like to know a little bit more about that 150 kilometers. I guess I'm not stuck in stone on it, but I'd like to hear a little bit more on it. And perhaps input from the public might come out of a public meeting that, convinced me that there should be change in some other area, but I think we're 95% there, and that's why I say in principle.
Yeah, I think we
Perhaps.
need to find a way to say it that we're
Mhm.
still waiting for input from the public, but
Could we say perhaps that that these recommendations are approved pending the results of the public meetings and open houses that are forthcoming?
Perfect.
you got it. Is that your motion, Carl?
Yes.
Or are we going to find a seconder who emulated his motion? Go ahead, Tom, you're seconding it. Any comment on the motion? All in favor? That motion is approved. Okay, well, that is it for this special meeting. That's what we tried to accomplish. And Martina should be very proud of yourself. A gazillion-page document was approved in 27 minutes from members of council. So you should pat yourself on the back. Okay, no closed session. I'm going to have a motion to adjourn, please. Sheila and Heather, all in favor? That motion is approved. We'll return at 5 o'clock with our regular council meeting. Thank you all, everyone. We'll see you at 5.